In today's video, Avocademy mentor Mafe is going to walk you through auto layout basics. This is everything you need to know to get started with auto layout. Before we jump into the tutorial, make sure to like and subscribe, and if you'd like to talk to an Avocademy mentor, click the link in the description. Let's get into it.
In today's video, I am going to walk you through auto layouts basics, and I am also going to show you how you can use auto layout in different types of design. So let's dive into it with this example I've created. We have 3 circles, and let's suppose that in your design you want to align them horizontally and having them in an even distance. So you could just start aligning them and start trying to calculate the distance between each object and try to move things around, or if you also had you can also align them like this and tidy up a bit. So that would work as well. But then Figma created auto layout to help us really quickly organize all the information we need in our design. So how to use auto layout? To use auto layout, you have to select the elements you want to work with, and you would right click and select add auto layout. If, like me, you're the kind of person who prefers using shortcuts, so you could use Shift A, which is what I am going to do right now, clicking Shift A. This, as you can see very quickly, align the objects in a horizontal line with an even space of 268 pixels. So there's 268 pixels from here to here and from here to here, and you can know that because when you hover on this like pink area, you will see that that's the number. So okay, we have auto layout, and what exactly happens when you create an auto layout? So that you will notice that a few things happen. So first and foremost, all the elements were aligned horizontally. That's great. The other thing you will notice is that now you have this auto layout panel to the right. And another very important thing that happens when you create auto layout, and I'm going to undo the auto layout I created. Please observe here to the left that we have 3 layers, and these layers are 3 ellipses, right? But when you combine them, also check this out, into an auto layout, it creates immediately a frame. A frame just like this one, or when you're creating a phone, it creates a frame. And I am going to create a stroke to make it even more evident that this is inside a frame, and we can name this auto layout so we keep track of the frame. And the third thing that auto layout did for us was creating this even space between elements. So there were 4 things happening: the alignment, the panel, the creation of the frame, and the even spacing. When we talk about auto layout, there are 2 important things that are happening. So one are the things that happen inside. Let's just put this closer. The elements. So the internal elements is one thing that is important in auto layout, but the other important thing is the frame. So I am going to copy this here so you keep track that one thing is the elements inside and the other one's the frame. So let's begin with the elements inside, and let's see what the panel offers us. The first thing you will notice is that you have like a selected arrow that it's pointing towards the right. This means that the objects are aligned horizontally. If you select the other option, it's going to change the layout to align all the elements with the same distance but vertically. So that's the first option. So Figma is asking you, how do you want to arrange these elements, horizontally or vertically? So you can say horizontally. Also, you can manipulate the distance between elements, and there are a few ways you can do this. If you zoom into the elements, and you hover in the space between, in the middle you will notice there's like a solid magenta line. If you click and stay clicking and you move your cursor to the left or to the right, you will be able to adjust this distance. And if you adjust this one or this one, it doesn't matter. whatever distance is going to apply always. So you're here adjusting the distance between. Another way to do it that it's not so manual, you can double click this line, and here in the center you will have the space between, and you can say I want it to be 50. And the other way, it's here in the panel. You also have this drag option where you can, if you click here in the icon, you will notice that the cursor becomes like a slider. You can adjust the number there, or here you can basically write the number you want. So that is the second option Autolayout offers us. The third option and fourth option, but it's really the third option, it's the padding. So what exactly is the padding? The padding is the distance between the object and the frame. So if I create another circle, and let's put a happy color to the circle, and I also create Autolayout using Shift A, you will notice that I also have a frame, and I can add some fill no stroke so you can see it. And this time it created a padding of 8 pixels. So there is 8 pixels between the border of the circle to this margin, and it goes across all the ways. Since we're a fan of shortcuts, if you hover on top of the padding and you get those like pink lines, and you press Option in Mac, you will be able to adjust both the up and down, or if you're here in the right and left, you will be able to adjust them simultaneously. But if you want to adjust all the 4 at the same time, you would have to press Option and Shift, and this is going to give you access to changing all the 4 paddings at the same time. The other option is holding Option and Shift and double clicking this area. You will open this option where you can basically adjust the padding as well. So this is the padding that you can adjust either manually like this, or holding Option, I think Alt in Windows, to manipulate them, or all at the same time pressing Option and Shift. But here in the panel as well, you have the options to changing the padding. If you change this, the first one, it's going to change the one to the left and to the right, and this one controls the up and down. However, if you expand this option, you will get access to all the 4 paddings individually. There are cases where you may want to have different paddings in the different like sides of the object, and that is fine. And I want you to know that you do have the option of adjusting them simultaneously. So in this case, for example, I want them all to have the same padding, so I clicked Option and Shift, and you see that I have all the numbers of the different paddings that I assigned. But if I want them all to be the same, I just have to click, let's say 20, and everything will be 20. Now, the other thing that we have is this square. So to demonstrate what this does exactly, I am going to create this frame a little bit like this. And you will notice that you have like 3 columns. This means that the elements are close together, right? This is like a visual representation. And you can align the objects to your frame depending on what you want, and this option provides that for you. Let's suppose that you want this purple circle to be closer to the left, like here in the border of this padding, and you want the pink one to go to the other border. So Figma offers that option as well. In this moment, what you're telling Figma is, I want these 3 objects to be aligned horizontally. I want a space between them of 48 pixels. So this is the constraint. This is what Figma is doing for you. And you also said, I want them in the center, and no matter what, I want to have a 20 pixel padding. But if you go here to these 3 dots, and in the spacing mode, instead of packed, you select space between, that is going to also change here the representation. You can see now that all the three columns are further apart, and what this means is that this space between doesn't matter anymore. It is subject to the frame. So if you move the frame, the space between is going to change. This circle, it's anchored to the right, this one is anchored to the left, and this one will remain in the middle. And you can also change this, and if you were working vertically, it would work exactly the same. Like if I adjusted this size, that is the effect it would create. So since I'm a big fan of shortcuts, you can also click here on this square, and with the key X on your keyboard you can undo that to the previous setting you already had. So that is changing between space between and just the previous the stack alignment. Also, if you override this with the word auto, it's gonna create that space between as well. So Figma offers a few other alternatives here. To do that, I am going to basically duplicate the ellipses, and I am going to give them a stroke. And I'm gonna place the stroke outside, and I'm gonna say it's 12. Actually, let's do it inside here. Let's do it here. So let's add the stroke, make sure it's outside, 12. And let's see the padding. Let's put this in auto. So here you will see that the padding is aligned to the object, and it's regardless of the border. But sometimes that can cause a problem in your design, and you want Figma to also take into account the border when creating the auto layout. To do that, you would go here to the three dots, and here in the stroke you would have to just change it, include it in the layout. So now you can see here that the padding is in the border, it's aligned with the border. So that is that. And in case, for example, you have probably seen that there are some, let me just undo this. I also double click it. If you have a space between and you double click, it will also remove that. So there are times where you have, for example, photo of a user A, or user B, user C, and you've probably seen something like this. So that is created by using a negative space between the elements. And the option that they give you here is that the last option, so the pink one, is on top, or you can put the purple on top. That depends on what you want to do. And the final option is related to text. So let me just type hello, and here I'm gonna type a G, and I am going to create a rectangle. And now we're gonna create an auto layout. At this moment, everything is aligned to the center. You can see here how everything is basically center aligned. But the other option that you have here is align text to the baseline. So what that did is you will notice that everything is aligned to the bottom, but not to the bottom of the box of the text, but to exactly where the text begins. So there are times where you may want to do that, and that is how you would achieve it. So now that we have seen how the elements inside work, let's talk about a little bit about the frame. So here we have, every time you create an auto layout, you will have a frame. So let us do this example using rectangles this time. So I'm gonna go ahead and set the rectangles. Okay, so we have these rectangles, and I am going to apply, as you can see, 3 rectangles, apply auto layout. Now they are inside of a frame. So let's call this auto layout rectangles. And I am going to add a stroke so you can see it. Also, I am going to add a padding of 24 pixels each side, 24. Perfect. So the frame in this exact moment is hugging the elements inside. But what if I want this to be bigger? You will see that these elements didn't do anything. I want you to notice this part of your screen. Now the frame, it's affected by these figures more than here. So here you will notice that it's fixed. So what it's telling you is that the frame size and width is 686 pixels. Let's put it in 400. But if you wanted it to hug the contents, you also have the option here to hug contents. So what hug means is that the frame, it's going to adjust its size to the content inside. But what if we wanted to do the exact opposite? What if we wanted the internal part to align its size to the external part? This is very important when you're doing responsive elements. So in this case, you want to change right now fixed. When you have this in fixed, it means that no matter how you change the element, it's going to remain this size. So it is not responsive, right? It's not adjusting, it's fixed. But if you change it to fill the container, now what you're saying is that this object is going to shape or resize itself according to the frame outside. And if you change the size of the frame outside, the one that it's fill will always be filled. And the same applies in the vertical aspects. Let's put this in space between to make it more evident. So here you can see how the elements move because of the space between. If I didn't have the space between, the elements would remain wherever I tell them to. So here, this is fixed, but if I put this to hug contents, this is going to, and you change this to 40, the frame, it's going to be subordinate to the content, whereas when you double click and access the content and put it in fill, the fill, it's gonna be subordinate to the size of the frame. You have a third option, but we're gonna see that third option in one of the examples I've prepared. So this is basically how the frame works, how you can change the internal objects from fill to fixed width, and you can change this so everything is working independently. So if this is fixed and this is fixed, nothing is responsive. So let's see one very common application of Autolayout, which is buttons. Typically, how you may think it's a good idea to create a button is create maybe a rectangle and then add a text that says button, maybe. Let's put it maybe in 40. And you would say, yes, I have this, and now I'm gonna group it. So you can right click and group selection or hit Command G, and then you have your button. This is a practical solution in terms of if you would do it just once. But if you want to create this a component and have different buttons and create a design system, that wouldn't be the best way to approach it. A better way would be using Autolayout. So I am going to replicate this button of TripAdvisor with low cap. Okay. So one thing I want you to notice is that you can create an auto layout out of anything. So either it's a shape or a text. You can always, by clicking Shift A, create this auto layout. You will notice, because here you have the text and here you have the T for text, but when you auto layout, it creates a frame and it creates like an arrow that you can expand, and inside it you will see the text. So everything can be auto layout. So it's a matter of playing with margins and with paddings to create the same effect. So let's change this text into maybe 22. This is not the same font, but for the sake of this exercise, we are just going to, I don't know why this is not working. Okay, let's just leave it like this. And this already, let's see, let's add the auto layout that it went away. And what we want to do is then to the frame that we're going to name button, we are going to add a fill, and to make it the same color as the exercise, I will use the dropper. And then I will double click to access the text, or also if you press Command, you will directly select what you are on top of. And let's now change this to white. Perfect. And let's see, now I can bring up into front. I think that the problem is that this is not here. Let's see. Yeah, probably that's the reason why, that this was not in the layer. Let's see if now I bring to front. Where is it? Bring to front. Still nothing. Why? Hold on, let me fix this. So I don't know why it was not working, but I drag and drop the layers here. Okay, so let's come here and let's see. What I can do is I can create, let's put the text in the center, and I am going to create this guides over here. Let's see if I can make it more precise, like this. Perfect. And I am going to expand this, so now I know exactly I have the same height. And now let's do the same thing for the width. That is a way to do it. You can also start playing around with numbers here, adding, changing the width of this element. You would have to change this to fixed, and that would enable this option. If it's hugged, you're not going to be able to, but if you change it to fixed, you will be able to change the size manually. So let's adjust this here. Well, and let's bring this here, and now let's resize and resize. And here you will also see the option to round the corners, so let's give this 100%, and we have a very similar button. And it was made using auto layout. So auto layout sometimes can also be, it is for mostly for organizing elements, but it also helps you to create groups that you can easily edit later on. So that is another way where you can use auto layout. Buttons is a very common application. And the other very common application is create an auto layout out of an auto layout. So you have auto layouts inside of auto layouts and inside of auto layouts. So for example, we have this circle and we have this text, and we want to create a list. So the first thing is to select both options and create an auto layout. I think they are too far apart, so let's adjust this to maybe 16. And this is gonna be option 1. Option, just option. So this is an auto layout altogether, this button and this option. As you can see here, the padding is 0, and that's something I am interested in. Now, if you select the object and you use Alt or Option and you drag and drop it in the bottom, you are going to duplicate it. And if you hit Command D several times, you're going to duplicate that using the same space that you had previously. But it doesn't matter. You could just have this scattered and it won't matter. So you have 5 auto layouts. Now, you can select them all and create an auto layout, and this is going to create a space between that it's even. So let's say we want this to be 24. Sorry, I changed the fill here. 24. And now you have a list. So this is very common application for auto layout, and in this application, for example, a frame, it is not necessary to add color or border or stroke to the frame. So this is another way to do it. But a very common way to use auto layout is, for example, when you're doing cards. So let's replicate this card in a lo-fi mode. So let's just create a circle, not a rectangle. So let's create this, and I'm going to replace the text for stripe here, right? And then we're gonna have this image, and we're gonna change this text for some lines here. The text I am going to leave, and actually let's grab the button we created and let's put it here as well. And the text I am going to use a lorem ipsum. Okay, great. So I have here, I'm going to change this to regular. I have my card components. So let's just bring them here. Let's just bring them here. And there you go. So there are several things that will happen here. And actually I want to create, let's suppose that we have a share button here and a comment. So this will be a share and a comment. So let's suppose we have something like this, and you say, okay, the time has come where I'm gonna prove all my auto layout skills. So I am just gonna go ahead and let me just fix this text because this is driving me crazy. Good. So you say, this is my moment, this is where I'm gonna do all the layout I learned, so I'm gonna select all and click Shift A. And then this hideous things happen and you are crying like I cried the first time that I did that. So the reason why this is happening is because auto layout, it's always gonna create the same space and the same properties for all the elements. But sometimes that's not what we want. So that's when it comes in handy to create auto layouts of auto layouts. So let's take this example, and here I want to do something even more crazy, like I'm going to put this over here. So you say, something that has been helpful for me is to understand compositions as sections. So this would be the top section, the image, title section, text, and button. So each we would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections, right? I would try to create auto layouts for each section. So this was probably a little bit smaller, yeah. So this would be one section, and you are gonna do, okay, so let's auto lay this out. But the same problem that earlier. I applied an auto layout, and now what it's supposed to be like an icon and a text and 2 icons are now evenly distributed, which is exactly what auto layout does, except that in this case is not what I want. So in those cases, what I want to do is I want to create each section of the section as an auto layout. So this is gonna be called name, and I am going to group this, and I'm gonna name this icons. So here I want to have a distance of 16 pixels worth, but let's say 8. And here I also want this distance to be 8. Perfect. So now I have 2 auto layouts that I can merge into an auto layout, and it's gonna be the top section. Perfect. So now if you select all the elements, for example here also, let's auto lay this out, and let's say this is the title. Now if we select this all and we create an auto layout, you will notice that it didn't do that weird thing that happened earlier. On the contrary, this is exactly what we want. Perfect. So now that we have this, we can see that the background, let's apply a fill to this card, and let's put it like that. As we saw, very important to have the margins, so let's just apply 16 pixels, and here, select everything and just 16. I think it's gonna be needing a little bit more, so let's try with 32. That's about right. Okay, but then you have the situation like here you have a lot of space, and it's because of this. So if you shrink this, the objects are not aligning or resizing to the frame because of what we saw earlier. So we can change this into fill container, and now the image is the same size, but that is not what we want to do because this is the actual size. So here the problem is that this is larger, like it's exceeding like this margin, right? And we want it to be aligned. So you say, okay, so I'm just gonna not that, this one, I'm just gonna shrink this, and okay, hold on, let me see something. Yep, this one, and shrink it. So you would say that works, right? But then what about these things that are outside, like they didn't align themselves to this size? So that is because this is in hug. If you change that to fill container, and you change this to fill container as well, and this to fill container, it's gonna create, like, you will see that all the objects will be distributed, so everything is filling the container. And for example, in this case, we want it to be hugging. And what we want is, like, we have the top section, and we want the top section, instead of being fixed, we want it to fill the container. So here, because we have the outer frame, then we have another frame, we have three options. So we have the fixed width that we already saw, but since this is a container, like a frame, but it's also a child, like an object inside a container, you have the three options, but they are still the same. So you can either hug contents and adjust the frame so it hug your contents, or fill the container so it will follow the outer, so it becomes like a subject to the outer frame. So a good practice for responsiveness is to have things to fill the container. And what that is going to do is going to enable you a better responsive. And you want to probably do the same thing here. Like, what if this is not the case, but what if you wanted to put this button to the right? So you say, then I will change this to here, but you are affecting the button itself. So you say, okay, so I will come here and I can put all the elements to the right. That is a good way of doing it. But another way is also you can create an auto layout for this button, and you can have the margins, the padding be 0. And you can put this into fill container, but in this case you want to align it here. So that would be a way to also work around that situation, and to have like a responsive thing. But for example, here you will notice that these rectangles don't resize, and that is because they themselves should be, you see, they're fixed. They would have to also be filled container and fill container. The thing is that, well, in this case it doesn't matter, but if you want them to keep the same size, then like, yeah, you would have to, like, if you wanted them to keep their proportions, they would have to be fixed, and this would have to be fill container. So that would be the best way to do it. So this is a practical use where you can see auto layout in action. But before I finish this video, I wanted to show you something else. What if your text is too long? Like, what if you have a lot of text? For example, it's a blog excerpt, and the blog excerpt, it's very long, and you have below the text something that says read more. So to do that, Figma offers you the option to create what they call truncate text. So here, if you go into the text option and click here on the three dots, you will see different text options. Truncate, it's one of them, and what that does is that you can resize the text frame, and it's going to create those three dots to let you know that things are going to continue, like it continues. So in this text, for example, you can say fill container, and if the container goes up or down, the text is gonna adjust itself as well. So that is also a cool tip to keep in mind. So to recap, Autolayout, it's an amazing tool that can help you organize elements and also create elements that you can transform and, I would say, admin or tweak later on when they're components in a more practical and better way. And all the principles of Autolayout you can also find in Figma. Figma has this amazing community file where it explains a lot of the things that we already saw today, but it can you can just go and practice a little bit more in it. So I would also recommend giving this a look. And that's it. I hope that this video was very helpful, and hopefully this is going to help you understand better how Autolayout works.